Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here, and as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from California, which of course is the center of the world when it comes to cloud and software as a service. But my role in Oracle is that I'm the Senior Vice President responsible for our ISV and OEM business globally. And the globally piece is actually extremely important, because what we're talking about when we're talking about the cloud, when we're talking about this business, is how do you get reach? How do you provide services which are not just in California or not just in London, but get to Shenzhen in China or get to Seoul in Korea? How do we see the businesses changing around the world? And actually, one of the things that I think is really important when we talk about the cloud is really to start thinking about customers. Because at the end of the day, none of this stuff matters if customers don't get what they need, if customers are not moving with the way we as an industry are thinking. So what are our customers doing? Well, at Oracle, we have a thing called the International Oracle User Group. The International Oracle User Group is a wide range of companies. Now, some people say, oh, it's only large enterprises. That's not the case. In this particular survey that we did, about 17% of the survey were 100 people or less. So we looked at a very wide range of people when we were doing the survey. And it was quite interesting when we look at private cloud adoption. Unsurprisingly, between 2010 and 2011, there was a significant increase in terms of the use of private clouds. And I guess no surprise there. And I'm sure that as we go through 2012, we will see an even faster adoption of cloud. Interestingly, the no, we're not even considering it bundle, I think, is coming down much quicker. Wherever I go around the world, everybody is talking about cloud. Interestingly, in some places, I'm not sure that they know what the cloud is. I'm sure that in many places that we go, if we have 10 people in a room defining cloud, you'll probably get 8 slightly different opinions. But that's the way that a technology emerges. And as people move into this cloud environment where they want to see services on demand, they want to see infinite scalability and infinite elasticity, that world is one which is driven partly by cost, but also by agility. And I'll talk a bit more about that as we go through. And of course, public cloud is also increasing. Interestingly, private cloud is adoption faster than public cloud, and I guess that's not a huge surprise. But I think the whole way that the public cloud is going is actually increasing, as we would expect. In fact, IDC have already said that 80% of new applications are already being built with software as a service as being the primary deployment methodology. So it's here, it's working, it's happening, customers are using it. Maybe not the same across the world, but it is happening. But we need to start thinking about use cases. And when we do this, it's sort of interesting. You know, when I look at the way that applications are happening and moving onto the cloud, I guess unsurprisingly, new applications are coming onto the cloud, both the private and the public cloud, more than migrating existing ones. And as you can see from this, the private cloud, more adoption than in the public cloud for this. When we move across and into both development and test and production environments, again, interesting. I think many people initially thought the public cloud would be mostly for dev test, particularly at the initial stages, and production would be more on the private cloud. And as you can see from this chart, both dev test and production are happening in the public cloud at the same rate. When we actually look at this, one of the things that was interesting when we talked about this a couple of years ago was the fact that the majority of the cloud, and particularly the public cloud deployment, would really be departmental, people trying to get away from the IT departments, not actually what's happening. It's enterprise-wide as much as it's departmental. My view, by the way, is that part of the reason for that is that CIOs and IT departments are under such massive cost pressure that actually they are having to think about different deployment models and different ways of actually using the money that they've been allocated by their board of directors and their funders. And of course, when we think a bit more about this, it's more often used by employees than external users. And again, I think that's sort of interesting. I think the view was that everybody would just be having anybody coming in taking a service. Actually, it's being slightly more conservative than that as we move through. And then, when we actually look at the dynamic and stable workloads, there was a lot of discussion about cloud bursting a year or two, and we're seeing it as being pretty rare. This whole idea of moving from private to public when needed, actually not happening as much as everybody thought it would. And again, there was a thought that there would be a lot of temporary apps doing the small development as a reaction to a situation. But actually, it's more about long-lived apps which are lasting for more than a year than temporary applications. So there are many, many different cloud use cases that we're seeing across our survey group, and I think that's representative of the market. Now, the business that I'm responsible for, the majority of you have something to do with this. Either you are an ISV, or you're involved in the delivery of ISVs and so on. So what is the real opportunity for ISVs? And I think there are some very interesting things that the cloud does. If we're realistic about this, ISVs historically have developed applications. Frankly, it was up to the IT department of the customer to work out how did they secure the environment, to work out how did they get business continuity, how did they get scalability. The ISV was really interested in just delivering the application functionality. As you move into a cloud world, strangely, it's not like that at all. The impression that people have to have is of infinite compute capacity, of infinite network bandwidth, having the facilities to be able to do whatever they need to do whenever they want to do it, which means that the ISV has to seriously think now about the platform. The situation of saying, we don't really care what the platform is, we'll run on anything, is not actually a viable thing for ISVs to think about. In fact, having talked to some investors relatively recently, one of the investors made a comment to me, which was that they would not invest in an independent software vendor who was prepared to work on many platforms, because they said it was far too costly and they would not survive in a highly competitive software as a service world. So the way that you architect that platform is critical. One of the things that I do think is also interesting in this is you've got to start thinking about how do you deal with a hybrid world. How do you deal with a world which is partly on-premise, partly hosted, and partly software as a service? Can you really afford to have a different architecture for each of the deployment modes? The fact is that these operational requirements are critical to the way that ISV, independent software applications, are delivered to the customers. So I think there are three best practices that ISVs should really deliver. The first thing is all about architecture. Architecting for wild success. Nobody aspires to be small. Everybody is trying to either grow their market or grow the deployment around the world or to take more market share. Everybody needs to think about what happens if they are successful. The world that we live in now doesn't allow people to have lengthy periods of implementation. I find it fairly fascinating that there are still programs going on in some of our end user customers where they are taking several years to deploy applications. I can't even remember what the problems that we were trying to fix 2 years ago were. How could you possibly have an application implementation that went on for that sort of period? Agility is absolutely critical. But actually in those platforms, you've got to architect in a way which uses industry standard technology to allow you to concentrate on the thing that matters, which is the application. Nobody buys technology just for the sake of technology. They actually buy technology to be able to run some sort of application which delivers business value. And that platform, if you can move to standardization, can focus your R&D on the thing that makes a difference to you, your application. Some of the work that we've done has illustrated that about 30% of the costs inside an ISV are actually doing and changing and customizing platforms. That is an insane idea. Why would anybody start changing a database or middleware or trying to add onto an environment when it already exists? Part of our strategy is to give you the platform to allow you to focus on the thing that makes you money, allows you to grow, allows you to be agile, which is your application. And let me go back to something I just said earlier on. It's very clear. You've got to have the same architecture, whether it's on-premise, whether it's hosted, or it's software as a service. The on-premise business will continue for many years, even though there will obviously be a growth of hosted and software as a service deployments. Customers will want to do different things in different parts of the world for a whole variety of both technical and practical and business reasons. Being able to have that wild success, to be able to have an architecture which is the same across all the deployment models, are the things that make a difference. Let me give you an example. So this is Amazon. This is before they introduced the Kindle. Now, interestingly, one of the concerns that they had was, what's going to happen to our physical book sales when we put in Kindle? How successful will Kindle be? Nobody really knew. The fact was, it's been dramatically successful. It's been dramatically successful, and their physical book sales have risen at the same time. They had to make sure that the architecture that they had to support this business was one that could support wild growth. If it couldn't, it would have flattened out. It would have stalled that business. So the architecture is critical when you start architecting for rapid growth. And of course, there are barriers to cloud adoption. If you talk to the end user customer, this is some research that was done by Tier 1 Research. One of the major ones is about security. If you're putting things into the cloud, how can we guarantee security? Directors of companies in most parts of the world have a personal liability for data protection. They need to make sure that they can address those security environments. People are concerned about new technology. How do they integrate the old with the new? People are resistant to change. They've had things running well for the last few years. Do they really want to think about new ways of doing things? The platform is the thing that allows you to address these things. By building security into the platform, you can address those concerns of the concern that the end user customer has about how do you secure the environment. It's actually about a deployment model. It's not about changing the application. It's about allowing people to know it's the same at a platform level, you're just getting it in a different way. This is why this hybrid environment is so critical. Leveraging existing application IP and the investments that you make in the platform, no matter how you deploy, and using that common architecture is absolutely critical. It's sort of interesting as well. If you have a cloud provider, you may want to move between different cloud providers. How can you do that if you're not running on a standard architecture? How can you move when your business changes and your business grows if you're not on a standard architecture? How can you address the many changes that happen as you extend your applications, as you extend the business model, if you're not on a standard architecture? And that's why we are the people underneath the majority of the largest software as a service provider. Because the way that we have architected our platform products to allow for elasticity, scalability, business continuity, security, and so on are critical at the platform layer. Now, not all of these people would necessarily want to advertise that they're actually running on Oracle, as Treb actually said earlier on. But there are people like NetSuite, people like Salesforce.com, people like Right Now. In fact, we like them so much that we actually bought them. But the reality is that actually this platform is recognized as being critical. So how does our strategy fit together with all of this? It's pretty straightforward. We want to provide the platform to give you a set of products as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service for private clouds, for public clouds, for hybrid environments. Whether it's software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service, whilst recognizing that people have to have choice. They have to be able to have that flexible adoption model. That's our strategy. So how do we deliver that? Well, one of the advantages that we have is that we're an applications company as well. Excuse me. So we have developed our Fusion applications to be able to be delivered as software as a service. That means that we know what is required for a platform to deliver that environment. If we look at our middleware stack or our database stack, the way we've engineered hardware and software to work together allows us to deliver a genuine platform as a service environment for any application. With the hardware, the operating systems, the virtualization environment, we've looked at this in terms of how can we deliver an infrastructure as a service which is scalable, elastic, and secure. And how do we manage that environment with Enterprise Manager 12c being designed to actually manage across the whole stack? And then, of course, we have cloud services. And we have the Oracle Public Cloud as well, something that was announced here in San Francisco last Open World. But the key components of this, the componentry which we think makes the difference, is the embodiment of hardware and software engineered to work together. The Exadata Oracle Database Machine and the Oracle Exalogic Elastic Cloud. It's not about the hardware. It's got disks, it's got connectors, it's got servers. That's not the point. The point is, every one of these machines is the same. It's just a platform. They just run standard Oracle database, or they run standard WebLogic. And because of the engineering that we've put in terms of Exadata with the database, with WebLogic on Exalogic, massive performance increases. Now, performance is always interesting. But that's not really the point either. The point is that with standard architecture, the deployment models are very, very quick. They're the same. The architecture is exactly the same. When you want to get elasticity, you can just put another one of these machines or another rack of these machines together, and they will instantly linearly scale. But they're all the same. It is about how can we work with our ISVs to leverage that standard architecture. As I said, it's not about the hardware. It's not even about the software. It's the way it's put together. If you take something like the database machine, which will probably take traditional applications and run them 10 times faster, actually, that means they'll run 5 times faster, but only need half the amount of machines. It allows in a cloud environment that you can architect for wild success because you know that you have the choice of expanding and having the elasticity that you need. If you're running in a cloud environment, running out of compute power is the death knell. You've got to be able to provide that environment. It's just a platform. It allows you to concentrate on the application that is your differentiator in the marketplace. And the Oracle Public Cloud is an embodiment of this. The public cloud is based on these standard architectural building blocks that I've just been talking about. The initial offerings will be some Fusion applications, like human capital management, like talent management and CRM. Also delivering the Oracle Social Network, but we'll also deliver a database service and a Java service, and we will extend those services over time. But the architecture of Oracle Public Cloud is exactly the same as what I've just been talking about, which is available for you to use either as a public cloud provider or as a software as a service provider, or indeed as a hybrid provider. So why is this so important? It's complete. It spans the whole environment, whether it be applications, so it could be integrating those applications together, but also the industry-leading products which Oracle have been known in the marketplace for are part of this offering into the marketplace. It's an embodiment of what we're offering across the environment. And it's open. It's just around Java and SQL standards. It allows things to get moved in and out of the environment. Allows the elasticity, the extensible environment that we need. And security is embodied in the platform. And as I've said at least 4 times in this presentation, it's exactly the same architecture, whether it's on-premise, whether it's in Oracle Public Cloud, whether it's a hosted environment. It's exactly the same architecture. Much easier to support, much easier to deploy. One of the interesting things about having a standard architecture is how agile you can be. Interestingly, in the middle of a cloud presentation, I'm about to give you an example of an on-premise environment. In Europe, there was a very large deployment on this architecture. Because they were running on WebLogic and Oracle 11g, they went from delivery to pre-production in 5 days, because all they had to do was make sure that the hardware was working the way they expected. They went into full production 23 days after having delivery of the hardware. That's the sort of agility that you need in the cloud world. They didn't really care how they were going to deliver it because they knew it was a standard architecture. So what are the key things that I'd like you to take away from this morning? The first thing is about architecture. Having an enterprise-grade environment is critical for success in a software-as-a-service environment. Architecture of that platform is key. We spend $4.3 billion a year in research and development. For North American-based companies in all industries, so that includes things like life sciences and aeronautics and so on, we are the 8th largest bigger investor in R&D. I want our ISVs, my ISVs, our business to use all of it. As part of the Oracle Partner Network, you're entitled to use that software for development and test for free. We want people to take advantage of all of those platform products that I put up because we want people to use that platform and concentrate on their application. That's the architecture story. That's how you architect for rapid growth and wild success. And actually, it's a strategic asset. The ability for you to go to your customers and say, there is no difference. Our platform allows you to move that in any way that your customers want to move. And that taking advantage of hybrid deployment models is absolutely critical in this world which is changing as rapidly as the cloud is forcing people to. Now, we have a variety of assets which we can help people with. If you go to partner.oracle.com, you can see all the things that I've been talking about in much more detail. But the key here is about simplicity. It's about architectural building blocks. It's about being able to have confidence that what you're going to deliver will just work. We don't have time to make mistakes in a cloud world. I'd like to thank you all for listening to me. I do have some time to take some questions, so I'm very happy to take them however you'd like to deliver that. But thank you for listening to me at this early time on a Wednesday morning. Do we have any questions? By the way, I can't see a thing because of the light, so... So you're all either asleep or it's so clear. Okay, so there's a laugh, so it's all so clear. Fantastic. Excellent. Right, so I've got you ahead of schedule, Trev. Rihanna. Thank you all very much indeed.